was trying to figure out how to turn this on. I'll have Bill help me here. No, does that work? Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. I just want a couple of preliminary things. First of all, the reason I get these chairs up here, I have some neurological damage. I can walk, obviously. I can sit, but if I stand still for more than a few minutes at a time, it starts hurting. I'll be standing up a lot because the adrenaline gets going, and then I'll be exhausted after it's all done. So forgive me. You know, in the Berkshires, they had this big platform out front, a red platform, a big green chair. I was glad I wasn't wearing red because everyone was coming up on my lap telling me what they wanted for Christmas. Also, you'll have to forgive me, I'm a little hearing impaired right now. It's not a permanent thing. I got mucus in my upper nasal passages that I got to get a prescription to get rid of. So if I'm looking like this, I'm not seeing angels. If I tilt my head like that, it kind of helps me hear a little bit better. So I do that from time to time right now. I've really been looking forward to getting to Racine. First of all, because, you know, you've got I got a week up after this. Huzzah! But I've also been coming, you know, my grandkids are here, my two oldest grandkids, Maya. Say hi, Cameron, and our stepsister, Tamara. I gotta tell you, one of the cool things, my former son-in-law is a Baptist. Comes from a Baptist family. He had told me about a year ago that he was going to raise kids Catholic. And he had talked to them, and they wanted to be like Papa. And he did. You know, they had their first communion at St. Lucy's. And as it turned out, I put their picture on there, and Audrey was Cameron's community teacher. So she'd been following my website for a while, and we made contact. I'm really glad to get here. When I was a boy, we used to come up to the Racine Zoo, which wasn't much of a zoo when you were a kid. So the Milwaukee Zoo was great, and there was a park by the lakefront we'd go up to. Me and a little buddy, Scotty Clark, who lived in Kenosha. We'd get together sometimes, and every time we did, they had like a little creek going by that park on the lakefront. I don't remember which park it was, but I discovered that there were crawdads. So every time we'd come up, I'd have my mom get some chicken with us, and I'd leave them out every night. Not to get completely right, but a little right. And in that muddy water, you put it on a string, go down, all the crawdads are grabbing at it to get a bucket full of crawdads to eat. So if you find a creek by the park here with that's real muddy, you can get crawdads. I think that'll be of more interest to the kids than the grown-ups here. But there it is. Well, what I'm going to do is I'll talk for about an hour. After that, we'll take a little break so people can go to the washroom, do whatever you got to do, and then come back and I'll answer questions. One thing that's very important is that I know that everybody here has a life. You got things to do and all that sort of thing. If you need to go anytime during the questions, I like to stay as long as people have questions. If you need to go ahead and go. A few years ago, I was at a conference where a religious guy was talking. It was supposed to be a 2-hour presentation. When he got into hour number 5, everybody's looking around trying to figure out how they can sneak out. This is a no slink zone. I know you got lives. I respect your time, and I appreciate you coming here today. I'll just get right into the. Oh, let me sit down. I'll get right into the story, the history. First of all, all my life I've been visited by an angel and by others on that, with the same message. Told that in my lifetime the world was going to go into the greatest crisis it ever had up to this point. That many people would feel like it was the end, but it is not the end. That in fact God was reclaiming His people. He was going to give us another chance. And that God had work for me to do if I would accept it, but it would take a lifetime of instruction and training. It's not like I was doing anything else. This didn't seem odd to me. I mean, I was raised by Southern Pentecostals. If you've been by Southern Pentecostals much, they're always saying, God told me this, God told me that, you know, so it didn't seem unusual to me. What did seem a little odd is, but boy, he sure talks different to me than he talks to them. And when I was 7 years old in 2nd grade, I figured out that it dawned on me. I saw a story, or heard a story, and that most people who see people that others can't and talk to people that others can't hear are usually nuts. So what I did, I talked to my angel. I enjoyed the training and all that stuff. He'd tell me something was going to happen it would. What's not to like about that? But with the hubris of a 7-year-old boy, I laid down some conditions. One, if he ever told me to harm anybody, the jig would be up. I'd go to a doctor and confess everything. A second condition was that before I would ever actually speak or act on it, there had to be an authority on earth to which I could submit with my whole heart, and it had to allow it. To my surprise, he was not upset. He was ecstatic. I mean, he treated me like a prized pupil. He did have a couple of conditions of his own, which were agreeable. Probably not what you would think, but they were agreeable, and so moved on. The fact is, from about the time I was in my mid-teens up until mid to late 20s, I didn't really believe it myself. What I thought was, maybe this is just the way my peculiar mind processes a very powerful intuition. I didn't violate anything, though, I mean, any of the terms of that, because if what I had seen was true, the world was really going to need somebody who had submitted to that lifetime of training. By the time I got to late 20s, early 30s, I was thinking, man, there were too many things that were looking hinky, looking like things I had been shown. I'd been shown a world gone mad, where good was counted as evil, where evil was counted as good, where, you know, just everything, all the pillars fell of what holds up our culture. By the time I got into my 30s, I had figured, my mid-30s, early mid-30s, I had thought, I got to talk to somebody about this. So I had been going to a couple of, I had a spiritual director that I had started going to. I decided he was going to be the one. The fella, I call him sometimes Father Towering Intellect. He was a cum laude graduate of Harvard Law before he became a priest. One of the more prominent canon lawyers in the country for about 25 years, and still, I just saw him recently on the day after his 85th birthday. Best of all, he wasn't particularly enamored of mysticism. He accepted what the church had approved, but he didn't like it, and he didn't want to deal with it. One of my favorite quotes from him, and you've probably read it before, if you read my website, is faith is an act of the will. We have to choose. I love that. It's all the time. You know, back when we were fundamentalists down south, they have a joke that we're real hard on pants because we're always wearing out the knees of the pants, praying, and then wearing out the seat of the pants, backsliding. He recommended against that. Faith is an act of the will on it. But he also had profound integrity. I knew that if there was anything real to it, that he would not dismiss it just because it made him uncomfortable. First time I brought the subject up, I had told him about this. He said, Charlie, dismiss that. That's almost always a delusion. That's always, you know, no, stay away from that. So I was excited. I want you to think about the world in the last couple of years. If you were seeing it clearly from the time you were a kid, or seeing it, writing about it 20 years ago, would you want to prove yourself right? Or would you want someone to prove that you were wrong? That's what I was looking for. So I was delighted when he told me, okay, that's it, you know, that's authority. My angel came to me after that and told me that I hadn't played fair. And those are the words he used, that I hadn't played fair. That I had to tell this priest the contents of a particular visitation from March of 1993. And if after that he dismissed me, I was honorably dismissed. So I told him next time I came to see him, and he kind of rolled his eyes and said, all right, Charlie, let's get this over, and then we'll talk about serious things. Midway through the conversation, or midway through my narrative, he got kind of a faraway look in his eyes, and after I got done, I figured, okay, maybe this isn't going like I hoped it would. Well, after I was finished, he just sat in silence for a few moments, kind of shook his head and said, well, you better keep me informed after all, Charlie. So I did. I have 3 spiritual directors that I work with, all priests of Opus Dei. I want to make 2 points today. First of all, this is not a project of Opus Dei. It makes some folks in Opus Dei mighty nervous. I chose him because, contrary to what the movies and lurid novels say, the actual charism of Opus Dei is sanctifying your ordinary work, finding sanctity by doing the ordinary things with extraordinary love. That's absolutely key. I've said before, God loves the ordinary, so do I, so should you. The ordinary is where everything happens. I also don't direct or hire. It's just an unusual situation. Some people, if they get a spiritual director and they tell them something that they don't like, they go get another one. What's the point? Take care in finding one. This is not the situation here. Some have been an authority over others. They all work together. There's nothing I've told them that they all don't share. In fact, when I was investigated by the Archdiocese, they all got together to talk about how to handle the archives. Don't direct or hire. Now, something else that's come to mind, and I'm sorry, this is a little off topic. Sometimes people speak as they just do whatever a director tells them. With my directors, we'll argue. When we're done, we're in agreement. I may not agree, but I'll obey. But it's not that you never talk back. You're trying to find truth. The best relationship with a spiritual director is that I always pray before I go see one of them that this will be an encounter with the living Christ for both of us. That's how it should be. That dynamic tension helps make you better. I'll see one of them who's in Chicago next week. I call him Father Italian Scrapper. He was my favorite confessor. We would get at it and have at it, but what a wonderful man. Anyway, off of spiritual direction. We came to a point, the world just kept getting more and more wild. But I used to write. I started writing to my priests what I saw, what was coming, and that. I was hoping that I would contradict myself at some point in a serious way. Again, I wanted a way out. For the first 7 years, I was still looking for a way out. After that time, I started thinking, that guy's a tricky fellow. The reason I wrote this stuff down, I was trying to get out of it, but having written it down, there are witnesses, independent witnesses, that I was saying it. Indeed, 20, 21 years ago when I started. We got to the point where it was time. It was just too obvious. I mean, when you are, as of this spring, 1,200 Christians, it's my surprise in this country, had been fined, bankrupted, fired, or even jailed for refusing to participate in a gay wedding. That is insane. I mean, you've opened up real persecution in this country. It had just come to the fore. So I decided I had to start talking. I talked to my priest. I decided I had to start speaking. I started writing my website, The Next Right Step, charliejohnston.org will take you there. I can never remember the actual address. I know people think that, people sometimes tell me that if God was speaking to them, they would just do whatever he said. Well, again, most people who think God is talking to them are nuts. And when you say that, they don't know what they're talking about. Because God does speak to everyone here, through the scriptures, through the magisterium. Why would you think, if you don't do what you should do from that you would do if you have these other visitations? They're not as much fun as people think. I mean, it's a great honor, I'm glad to do it, but It's not what you think. It's like, to me, it's like saying you have struggled to carry 50 pounds on your back of the ordinary, but you think everything would be okay if God would just load you down with 1,000 extra pounds of the extraordinary. It doesn't work like that. I started writing the website, but I was kind of stubborn. I said, you know, I've done political stuff before, set up political websites, so I'll do it, but I'm going to market it. If you're going to make anything happen, you're going to have to do it. And I'm not going to do it. Within 6 months, it had gone global. Right now, I have regular readers in every country in the world except, anybody want to guess which is the one that I don't get any regular readers from?
China.
What?
China.
No, China. I thought I did. They have to go through proxy servers, but I got a lot of readers in China. North Korea. That's the only country in the world that I don't have regular readers in. So, okay, fine. When I started traveling around, that was in late winter or the spring of 2015. The reason I did that was because I had seen on December 20th of 2014, last hurrah, creating division in families, creating divisions among friends, trying to create division and confusion all over. I was shown then that real persecution was going to break out across the world and even in the United States in 2015. That Christians were going to be persecuted, marginalized, not being beheaded, crucified, and burned like they are in the Middle East. And 1.5 million of our Christian brethren out there in the Middle East have been. While we've been saying, well, there's no real problem. If you think we're not going to be held to account for ignoring that, you're wrong. We will be held to account. And I figured, what can I do to help on that? And I started thinking then that, okay, I can go and speak. I can do a tour, figure out how to start going around to places that invite me. I don't really have anything to say that you wouldn't hear from my website itself, but I thought, you know what, even at that time, I've got getting about 5,000 daily readers. I figured I'd get enough to where every city I go to, I can get 20 or 30 people out. And then they'll see that they're not alone. Well, the whole culture, the media is trying to marginalize them, make them feel like they're superstitious nuts. They'll see that they're not alone. To my surprise, it was bigger than I thought. The average audience is about 150. I mean, I had 750 at one, which that was one like in the old Jaws movie, looked around, we got to get a bigger boat. But you could see, when I first started last year, people looking around and seeing, holy cow, I'm not alone. And I know that groups have sprung up across the country. Some of them call them storm dinners, some of them call them next right step groups, where they get together every couple of weeks, pray, and talk about how they're going to help each other through this, how they're going to help their neighbors that may not even be contemplating through this, because that's the key to everything. Well, while I was out there, my archdiocese, as you might imagine, started getting a lot of calls. I got rather prominent, particularly in the United States, but around the world. My chancellor called me, I think it was in August, and told me that they were opening up an investigation into me. I said, oh, do you need me to come back right now, cut short? He said, nah, when you're done, come on back. He said, we're reading your website, we see what you're doing, and right now, but we're going to do a formal investigation at the direction of the Archbishop. When I got back, we talked, I met with them, they set up a commission, I met with them, and I got the archives for them so that they could see. My priest who kept the archives, smart fellow. Right from the beginning, he didn't just keep the handwritten letters. He kept the postmarked envelopes that they came in. And this was what was submitted when it went through. The archdiocese was not. The archbishop was making no comment on my prophetic messages, the prophetic element of it. That would prove itself out or not in a very short time. But since it had gotten such attention, what they were looking for was primarily three things. One, was I contrary to faith and morals on anything significant? No. I mean, we talked about a couple of things, but I am faithful to faith and morals. There was no contradiction there. Second, had I been consistent, this was the most critical. I mean, this was probably the most, not probably, it was definitely the most impressive one. They had the archives, they saw. I hadn't just started talking about these times a couple of years ago. I had been writing about what's happening now 20 years ago and saying fundamentally the same things I am, including the rescue in 2017. I didn't just start saying that. First time I saw it in writing in the archives was on September of 2001, and when I had written it, I didn't write it as something new, but as something my priest and I had talked about frequently on that. That was impressive. The third thing was I obedient to the church? I was surprised. I thought that there would be some sort of a test restriction, but they put no restrictions on my content. The only restriction they put on me, that the Archbishop put on me, was that I can't give a presentation on church property in Denver. That would be seen as a tacit endorsement of my prophetic message on that. But no restrictions on my content at all. They continue to monitor. They could step in. The Archbishop could step in at any time and say, okay, Joe, you're getting out of line here. But, you know, so on I went. What I've always talked about, I used to describe it. But I did describe it from the first time that I was with my priest. I mean, it was wonderful. They challenged, they focused, I thought. I described what we were in as a global civil war fought on cultural lines. Which is, you look at these times, what an apt description of what it is. A global civil war without borders. In the West, we have been at war for a long time. We could live and let live, but the anti-God progressives will not allow it. They are determined to shut down anybody who disagrees with it. And it's become, I mean, look at this right now. Do you remember what this ridiculous protest after the election? You remember how the Mormons were protesting after 2012 when Romney lost? I heard there was one double parked outside a temple and a couple had their ties askew. That's what insanity is, you know? We are in a situation where a whole bunch of people, it's their way or they're going to pitch a hissy fit. I read one progressive who was taken aback by what happened. He said, you know, I never thought love trumps hate would involve so much arson and assault. In any case, my job was very simply to give people heart to endure to the shore of rescue. 3 primary duties: defend the faith, hearten the faithful, defend the faithful. God is not done with us. You're going to see some scary things. This is the time that He is going to renew. He is renewing His people. What you're seeing around the world right now is just the collapse of the old order. We brought that on ourselves because we think we're sufficient to ourselves and don't need God. In fact, the storm is not God's punishment of us. It's not of God's making at all. It's of our making. And this would be the end if God weren't stepping in on things. He's always restrained us from some of the consequences of our actions. At this time, because we've become so disobedient, he thought, okay, you think you're the Titans? In order to bring you back, I'm going to let you see. I'm going to let you suffer some of the consequences of your own actions. And that's what He's done. And that looks like a storm to us. In some of the presentations, people would complain about the quality of both nominees for president this year, and I didn't disagree with them on that. But one of the things I pointed out, you know, John Adams, after the Constitution was finished, said, we have given you a system, but it will only work for a religious and moral people. It will not suit any other. If we were a faithful people, neither one of those two nominees could have been elected. When you point the finger, don't forget to point the finger at yourself. When we talk about the act of contrition early on in the Mass, it's not just, we have sinned not just in the things we have done, but in the things we have failed to do. Whatever our intentions, we fail to defend the culture of life. We fail to defend the basic virtues that made this nation great, that made us a light to the world, that for a long time inspired liberty throughout the world. So all of us are accountable on that. You see the different, the problems going on right now. I know in the questions, some of you will get into that. By the way, in the questions, the rules are you can ask whatever you want and then I'll decide whether or not to answer it. Usually I answer most of them. The key in how to deal with this is simplicity, the ordinary. Drop the delusions of grandeur. I give a 3-step process. Acknowledge God, take the next right step, be a sign of hope to those around you. Quit worrying about the big things, take care of the little things. And I want to explain a little bit about what each of those mean. Acknowledge God. Formal prayer is important, and I don't want you to neglect it. Going to Mass, going to church, it's important. Don't neglect it. But the most neglected form of prayer is the prayer of doing. We are called to go forth, to be an evangelical people. We're called to remember that God is a great wellspring. He's the living well that animates everything we do, all the joy. I like to give an example of what I mean by acknowledge God. I was a single dad. When my kids were little, one day we were going, on the 4th of July, going to Great America. You know where Great America is. On that, it was about 10 miles from our doorstep. Little secret that may come in handy for you. 4th of July is probably the best day of the summer to go to Great America. Everybody from out of town is doing something else. Everybody in town thinks that it's going to be jam-packed, so they stay away. I mean, it's a great day to go to the park. Music and youth. So we're going to go out to the park, we're going to have a great day together and all, and first of all, we're going to daily Mass. And my kids asked me, Daddy, why aren't we going to church? I said, well, I explained the holiday, holy day. I said, but you know, we got a whole day to enjoy each other. We're going to pray to ask Jesus to really have us enjoy, make it a great day, you know, a really memorable day for us. Okay. So we went on to Mass, went on to the park. At the park, we went on all the roller coasters, 3, 4, 5 times, the flume rides. I love the flume ride, so does my daughter. I mean, that splash in the face where they take the pictures, we're giggling at all the pictures. My son at the time, a huge fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Who do you think showed up unannounced in concert that afternoon? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. After the fireworks that night, as we're going back to the parking lot, my son looks up at me and says, wow, Dad, Jesus really did make this a great day for us. And my daughter's eyes went wide and she said, you were right, he did. Now we had fun that whole day. Nobody was browbeating anybody with religion. We had fun. That, my friends, is acknowledging God. After that, it was our habit to go to Mass before we do something fun. Had I neglected it after that, my kids would have reminded me. How many kids do you have? How many of you have kids that will remind you, hey, we forgot to go to church? It was wonderful. Take the next right step. You've got to trust God. And what is it taking the next right step mean? Well, first of all, you know how all of our institutions have gone. The media, government, academia, they all think they know better than you how you should run every aspect of your lives. And if you don't agree with them, they think they should be allowed to force it on you. They remind me of Wile E. Coyote. I mean, all their plans are constantly hitting the canyon wall. They're constantly splatting on the floor of the canyon, blowing themselves up. And it never causes them to think that maybe I should rethink this. They want to tell you how to live your life when they make a mess of everything they touch. That is not the next right step. Now, some people who are wiser than this, but not quite wise enough yet, they look at how big all the problems are and how little we are, and they get paralyzed. They think there's nothing I can do. I'm so little. I want to remind you who our God is. Our God is the God who, when there were 5,000 people to be fed, took a couple little fish that they gave and a hunk of bread, and everybody was fed. God wants you to do the little that you can do. Don't worry that it's not enough. Of course it's not enough. And then give it to Jesus and all will be fed. You know, when you had a couple of little fish and that hunk of bread, you could have had 50 forensic governmental accountants making lines on those fish and figuring out how to divide it up, and everybody would have gone hungry. Do the little that's right in front of you. Don't worry. Now, sometimes you'll think, I like to tell you something that was amazing for me. When I became a single father, my son was still in diapers. He's 30 years old now, a SWAT commander down near Tallahassee, Florida. I was not a wealthy man. With the kids, my first year, it was miserable. Because if I worked enough to support the kids right, I wasn't spending enough time with them. If I was spending enough time with them, I wasn't working enough. I was driving myself crazy because there was no answer. You know, just struggling with it. And what I came to, after a year, I thought, there just is no answer. I'm just going to do the best I can and trust the God I get to fill in the hole, because there's nothing else I can do. And I got to quit beating myself up. After that, Grace took up the residence in our household. It was amazing. Our household became the center of the neighborhood. All the kids would come because we did fun stuff all the time. Mostly free fun stuff, but fun stuff nonetheless. I remember one time on Sunday afternoons I liked to take a nap. I'm laying there on the afternoon taking a nap and I feel something shaking me. I look up and my daughter is standing there with 4 of her friends, all grinning at me with big grins. She said, "Hi, Katie. I told all my friends you were going to make us hot dogs." I made them hot dogs. It was so fun that all the kids, they started wanting to go to church with us on Sunday. All the neighborhood kids. I had to limit it to 2 a week. And whoever the 2 a week were, you know, I'd keep a list so that we did the 2 a week, we're like, yay, we won! After about 4 weeks of this, my parish priest, Father Bevan, down at St. Gilbert's in Grace Lake, he looks at me and says, "Charlie, is there something you need to tell me?" I said, "Don't worry, Father, it's fine." But this grace took up residence. When we worry ourselves sick, we're never far from despair. When we do what we can and trust God for the rest, you don't have to cultivate joy. It springs up like dandelions after a spring rain. It just does. Keep it strong. Be a sign of hope to those around you. We all know people who you know, they want to feed all the starving children in Africa, and they want to save the whale, and they want to save the spotted owl and blue-bellied worm, whatever. And yet they don't even notice when their neighbor is hurting. That is not charity, that's not philanthropy, it's pure and simple vanity. They're dreaming of the statues that will be built to their nobility. They're completely self-absorbed. They're like the Pharisees of old, who used to, every time they gave something to the temple, have people walking in front of them, playing trumpets. That's not it. They have the reward. Being a sign of hope means getting outside of your own head. You know, if you're worried, did I do right? Did I do wrong too much? You're never far from despair. Example I like to give of being a sign of hope. Don't neglect yourself, but care about others. See us. Oh, it's the family of God. When I was on my pilgrimage, hot day, my pack was 75 pounds. That's what I worked up to. You know, as you get stronger. You do it every day, you get strong. I was up in Greeley, Colorado, nearing the end. hot day, came to a construction site to the east, had a big tree shade. I sat down resting. Across the street was this humble little neighborhood, cracker box houses. I'm sitting there 6 or 7 minutes, and this Mexican man and his daughter, 10-year-old daughter, 10, 9, come walking across the street. And what they had a plate, they had fried meat, 2 fresh burritos, and had a can of orange soda. Now they had no expectation of anybody ever knowing that they had done anything. They didn't do it for anything other than they saw an old man looking kind of wore out. They thought, let's fix him some burritos. Isn't that being a sign of hope? That's what it's all about, getting outside your own head. My mother, my late mother, God bless her, she suffered most of her life from depression at times, and she had some suffering with prescription drugs. Just, you know, when they moved back to Alabama, you know, from the Chicago area in '79, early '79, Dad and I had been worried that she just wasn't going to make it. It had been so long and deep on there. Well, when they got back down, you couldn't do that in a little suburb. They got some farm animals. They got a milk cow. Was one of the ones that they had. Mother got up every morning at 5:30 to milk the cow. Not because she had a sense of duty, but because she had read that if you don't milk a cow often enough, it starts hurting. It's painful for the cow. She couldn't bear to think that that cow might be in pain because she neglected something. She did it every day. And when she did, it got her outside her head. Within about a month, joy started rising again. This is what I mean. Get outside yourself. Don't be self-absorbed even when you think you're worried about did I do right or wrong. Do the best you can. God will cover the gaps. And if God can resurrect joy for you caring for a cow, how much will He do for you caring for each other? That's what being a sign of hope truly is. Being fully engaged with the family of God. And who is the family of God? Everybody. Everybody. Pure and simple. You know, I like to tell a few stories about my pilgrimage. I walked from February 11th of 2011 to August 21st of 2012. Walked across the country. I didn't walk from coast to coast. That wasn't the point. The point was to throw myself on a radical dependence on God for that year. For that year and a half. Actually, I walked for 13 months because I had several things that interrupted it. My mother died during that. I was back with the family for that. For the holidays, I spent with a couple of brothers out in San Diego on the thing. There were a couple of interruptions on it. But when I walked, I would sleep in the woods. It was an amazing thing. I did this because I was directed to. And I didn't think it was, I didn't understand. I mean, I had run some big operations, political, public interest things. In fact, one of my friends down in St. Louis was setting up this new public interest group for me to run because he was trying to dissuade me from doing this. So I always put a good face on it. I thought to myself, okay, God, you're telling me, you've been telling me all my life that during my lifetime, at some point the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket. And now you're telling me we're on the border. And you want me to take a long walk? I mean, you're looking for more than this. And beyond that, I mean, I had the neurological damage. I'm damaged enough on this side. I'm supposed to be partially paralyzed. I'm not. I'm always in pain, but, you know, there it is. I hide it pretty well sometimes. Sometimes, if you're family, if you're around me a lot, you know that I limp a lot of times. Late in the day, it's good for me that church is usually in the morning because I can genuflect and kneel. It's painful, but I can do that. By the time we get to the afternoon, I can only bow. Thanks be to God, one of my priests gave me a dispensation against it, which I don't like to take. Sometimes I absolutely need. My family thought that I was likely to get killed out there. And well, I always put a good face on it. I was like, you know, they kind of have a point. My son put everybody's fears to rest. See, I wasn't speaking prophetically to people then, but everybody knew that it was for some religious purpose. At Christmas before I left, in 2010, my son, God bless him, he looked at everybody and said, look, if you sent a marathon runner to walk across the country, so what? But you send a guy to walk across the country that has trouble walking across the room, that means something. That's the way God works. And everybody laughed. Okay. The rules for a pilgrim, the rules for an extended hike, for your nutrition, exactly the opposite of what you're used to. I was telling some family members at dinner one time, just before I had left, that, you know, the rules for an extended hiker, you need all the fat and all the calories you can get, because you're going to burn every one of them. When I said that, my sister-in-law looked at me and said, how about that? I've been preparing for an extended hike my whole life. You get out there, it really was a great plan. I learned a lot about how we are. First of all, every day, like I said, I slept in the woods. Every day, you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. You have to find cover. That's kind of nerve-wracking until you get used to it. Even after you get used to it, it can be kind of nerve-wracking and all. I was in Louisiana. See, I left with 50 bucks in my pocket, but I had my laptop with me. Before I had gone, I had signed up with Demand Media, been approved. I could write little articles for eHop at libraries and stuff. They paid me 15 bucks online through PayPal, and that's how I financed a lot of it. While I'm in Louisiana, I found this dense packet of woods where you get about 15 feet back in, opened up into a beautiful clearing. It was always cool, comfortable, you know, everything, and it was right across the street from both a McDonald's and a Burger King. All fat and calories I could ever want. I stayed there for a couple of days because it was so comfortable. You know, when you don't know where you're going to sleep every night, this was nice. And then I started laughing at myself. Thought we are such covetous creatures that even when we have nothing, if we get a nice piece of nothing, we don't want to let go of it, you know. You learn you do really have to trust God. It did increase that dramatically on things. I saw the heart of people all across the country. Now I got time to tell some of these. Tell you a couple of stories about the great heart of people that I met. Coming into Laurel, Mississippi, I was coming in from the Northeast. I love coffee. I drink coffee all day long. Usually the last thing I have before I go to bed is a cup of coffee, unless it's a glass of cherry Coke. One of the two. Here's a tip for you. When you're sleeping in the woods, you don't get a lot of coffee. Just out there. Well, when I go out walking in the early morning and saw something, I'd get so excited. So I see this convenience store in a different distance coming into Laurel, Mississippi. And I'm like, yes, coffee. Yeah. About 7:30 in the morning, I get a little closer. I see bars over all the windows, the neon lights that say liquor, and I'm thinking, okay, they're looking pretty busy, so maybe it's part convenience store, part liquor store. I got up to it, it was. I go inside, I get my coffee, I'm standing in line, I got my 75-pound pack on my back, you know, and I didn't drive up. The lady in front of me, she was in her late 60s. She had a quart of Miller in her hand, you know, to get the day started right. Breakfast of champions. And she looked at me, she was not unkind at all. But she asked me, she said, are you walking alone? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she says, well, you need to be out of here before dark, because this isn't a safe place for a white man to be walking alone. And when she said that, I said, I will fear no evil. That's what I would always say in such situations while I was really praying, Lord, make it so, because I'm feeling kind of nervous right now. And she looked at me, her eyes went wide, and she said, are you walking for God? I said, yes, ma'am, I am. She said, oh, let's pray together. So in her one hand, she's got a quart bottle of Miller, and the other hand, she said one of the sweetest prayers of protection I got the whole way. I mean, it was just wonderful, the way hearts reach out to each other. In Baton Rouge, I'd been at the library, my son was coming to meet me, spend a week with me. I laughed. What a wuss. Okay, he's a SWAT commander. But my son, after he got there, you know, he slept there, he spent a week with me. He got there, we stayed outside one night, he camped, and that. He was bitten up by mosquitoes, tore up by mosquitoes. So the next day he said, you know, Dad, you need a vacation. We're getting a hotel for the rest of the week. I loved it. It was great. But in Baton Rouge, well, before he had come, I had been working in the library. I made friends with the librarian. And there was a nice copse of woods. Here's a secret. I don't know why this works this way. Even in the cities, you can find the copses of woods. If you watch and see, you know, where you can duck into. I was in one of the worst neighborhoods in Baton Rouge. Little secret. The biggest, baddest, meanest gangbanger in the worst section of the city is terrified of the woods at night. I don't know why, but they are. Duck into the woods and you're perfectly safe. That's where it's safe. One day I'm walking back from the library, you know, I've been waiting. I got my heavy bag on the back, beaten down. This old saddle, maroon-colored saddle with the paint being pulls up beside me, and I look in, this gal, this woman, both of the man and the woman in there were about 30 years old. Now you're urban enough, you know what gang tats look like. I mean, just heavy, all the gang tats and everything. She sticks this bag, plastic bag like a convenience store out to me, and I take it and I start to talk. As soon as I took it, off they went. I look inside, there's juice boxes, snacks, little cakes. I mean, it really was a bag from a convenience store and these gangbangers. That's what they are. They had seen an old man, old white man, walking. They thought, oh, let's get him. Their hearts reached out. But of course, they had a reputation to maintain. So they didn't want to stick around for me to acknowledge that. Hearts reach out all across the country. I got to tell you about a gal in San Antonio. There were so many encounters. In San Antonio, there was a young woman. She could have been 19, she could have been 30. You know, I met a lot of homeless people. And that, she was very cheery. She asked me if I wanted to share a quart of beer with her. She had already gotten the beer. She wasn't asking me to buy it for her. She just wanted to sit and chat. We sat and chatted. She told me about her situation. Her boyfriend was in jail for reasons that I didn't get into much. He was supposed to get out in 2 or 3 months, and they were planning after that to move to Arizona and make a life for themselves. That's the plan. She asked me what I was doing. I told her, you know, what I was doing then. She was completely charmed. She just thought that was a great, she said, you know, maybe when my boyfriend gets out, we'll go to bed and everything. Well, I couldn't burn too much daylight on that, so I told her, you know, I had to get moving along. And I asked her to say a few prayers for me because although I always put a good face on it, she knows, she was living outside, she knows how tough it is. It's tough. And when I asked her that, she burst into tears. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, hon. By the way, I did say, I'm sorry, hon. Here's something you have to understand. You women, you just don't understand. If you're down south, where my roots are, if you don't call the waitress hon and darling, she thinks you're mad. And she's going to get lousy tip. You come up north in Yankee territory, you do call the waitress hon or darling, she thinks you're flirting with her. We just can't win. Anyway, I said, you know, what did I say, hon? I didn't mean to offend you. And she looks at me, you know, she's trying to get herself under control. And she says, do you really think my prayers would do any good? And I said, of course they would. Prayers always do good for everyone, you know. And she burst into tears again. And when she calms down, she told me something that really stuck with me. he said, I've had a lot of people tell me that they would pray for me. You're the only person that's ever asked me to pray for you. And I thought about that. You know, a lot of times when we tell somebody, if you've got friends, relatives, close people that you love, and you tell them you'll pray for them, that's fine. But when you're in a dispute with somebody, or arguing with somebody, or maybe potentially somebody that you might be looking down on, you say you'll pray for it. What they hear is Christians speak, forget bench, you lousy heathen. When you ask them to pray for you, it maintains everyone's dignity. And the great thing about prayer is it's always good. If you're wrong, it'll help you. If you've got a clean heart to correct yourself. If they say the prayer and they're wrong, it'll help them. If you're both wrong, it helps everybody. And it preserves and magnifies everybody's dignity. I haven't forgotten that lesson at all. But the hearts, I got invited in. I mean, people would meet me all the time. They'd ask me questions like, why was I doing it? Who was I doing it for? Who was I raising money for? We live in a very cynical age. Everybody's got an angle. Everybody's trying. When they found out I was just doing it, people would fall all over themselves, inviting me in, buying me a meal, or having me come over for the night. People are not just willing to help each other. They're hungry for it. They want to show their generosity, but they don't want to be taken. They don't want to be made a fool of. That's absolutely, absolutely critical. I was in Ventura, California. Again, I'm about to go into Los Padres National Forest, which is a mountain range in Southern California, and wood. I knew I was going to be in the wilderness for about 2 weeks. Wilderness is beautiful, but it's hard. And when you're walking through the wilderness, you don't get near as much to eat as you'd like. I kept trail mix. Trail mix will keep you going. But after a week of a couple of handfuls of trail mix, creek water every day, you get mighty hungry. And hungry out there is a whole different thing than what we normally call hungry. We normally say that we're hungry when we're just not full. You get, I'd say somewhere after about 48 hours of not eating anything, hunger becomes the dominant theme in your life. I mean, it just drives you. Anyway, I'm in Ventura. I know I'm going to be in the wilderness for about 2 weeks. This dense grove of palms across the street from a Wendy's. Get all the calories and fat you can do to start off with. Inside, it was just like a living room, a nice open spot in there. So I went in and I thought, oh, perfect, this is great. I laid my bag out. I pulled out a book to read. I usually carry 4 or 5 novels I swap out at libraries, with their permission. Libraries, the librarians. I think everybody has dreamed of doing that sort of walk, something like that at some time. They get caught up in that. Anyway, I laid it out. This man comes walking in, older than me. He's carrying a bag taller than him, a clear thick plastic bag filled with aluminum cans. He's homeless. I realized. I looked at him and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was your spot. I started to pack up. And he smiled. He said, I've actually got 2 spots. He said, you're already here. Don't worry about it. I'll just sleep at my other spot tonight and come back tomorrow night. Okay. So we started chatting for a few minutes. Nice fella. There was kind of an indentation back there. He said, I'm going to leave the cans here tonight, if you don't mind. And then he kind of scratched his chin. He said, in fact, if you need some cash, he gave me directions to the recycling center. He said, I can get more. I'm telling you, those cans, that had to be 2 or 3 days' work for him. Hearts reach out all across. Our hearts do want to reach out to each other. That was my typical experience everywhere. I'm going to tell you one more thing. Then another little story to close out the formal part of this. You know that government says that they don't allow any religious faith-based stuff because they say that religion is an intolerable imposition. It's intolerable burden placed on people who will receive it. the help. Going into urban areas, I met a lot of homeless people. And I noticed in cities that, you know, they, for some reason, they knew pretty quickly that I wasn't one of them, but that I was okay. They tell me, you know, if you need a sandwich, you go over here. If you need, if it starts to rain and you need a place for the night, you haven't got good cover, you can go to this one. And they tell me, you know, the Baptists do that, the Salvation Army's doing this, the Catholics do this. And I noticed everywhere I went, they'd always say, but don't go there. That's the government. It was consistent. And I finally, I think it was in Houston, it might have been late. I asked, you know, why is the objection to government? One fellow, they all said the same thing, but one fellow said it more eloquently than anybody else. He said, well, you know, you go by the Baptists, they want you to sing a little song about Jesus and they give you your sandwich and leave you alone. You go to the Catholics, they want to read you a little hymn, a little part of the Bible, and they give you a room and they leave you alone. But if you go to government, a government office, they want you to fill out 15 pages of paperwork, and they never leave you alone. I can testify personally that the people who actually receive the services, they don't mind singing a little song about Jesus. Fully government services at all costs. Kind of amazing. All right, I'm not, okay, I get it. I want to tell you the greatest angelic autocorrect ever. I was in Santa Monica, California. I'd saved up some money. I was tired and I got a hotel. There wasn't good cover. I figured I'd get a hotel. It was the off-season rest and make a lot of tracks the next day and that. So I'm feeling pretty good. I went out to get something to eat or some coffee, and I see this girl couldn't have been more than 12 years old, just scantily and provocatively dressed. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, if her mother could see her, she'd tear her up. Now, Santa Monica, you got to understand, is only a few miles from Hollywood. As the evening goes on, all of a sudden, I see all sorts of young girls with their mothers, all dressed like streetwalkers. I mean, I'm not a prude, but I'm a Midwestern boy, and I was shocked. And I really started thinking how sad that is. It really troubled me a lot. I'm thinking to myself that, you know, these poor girls, they're getting all their self-worth, and their parents are teaching them to get their self-worth from sexualization, from something that's passing by. This is guaranteed not to make people look at it in the fullness of their dignity, which is just a formula for disaster. It really bothered me. So the next day on the Facebook page, Abraham's Journey, I wrote an extended meditation on that. The last line of which I had written, that those who put their hope in things are ever doomed to disappointment. When I looked at what came out on that last line, what it said was, those who put their hope in thongs are ever doomed to disappointment. I started to correct it, and then I just looked, well played. But you know, in our culture, we were wrong. My generation, and a little earlier than that, we made a terrible mistake. Our grandparents, they would take a chance on opening the heart to another, but they were very slow to open the body. With our generation, we got to be very quick to open the body, but very slow to open the heart. The problem with that is, when you just do the superficial aspect of opening the body, you're going to get hurt. And then you've got scar tissue. You get more scar tissue, you keep doing it. You get more and more scar tissue to where you're no longer capable of opening the heart at all. We have betrayed our young people. We betrayed ourselves, we betrayed our young people. I understand. It's like if you're at sea, if you're in a rowboat, wave, lost out at sea, and you're dying of thirst, it's very tempting to drink that brine. And if you do, it'll give you some immediate relief. But it comes with a cost. It'll make it worse. If you keep doing it, you will die. We have condemned whole generations to spiritual death. And what we're called to do is remind them, call them back, to demand the fullness of the dignity of the human person. I know how hard, how strong the drives are, and that people will fall sometimes, but don't you engage with anyone that doesn't see you in your fullness. All you're going to do is get scar tissue, it deadens you. We have betrayed our young people, and we need to get it right. I'm going to finish with one quick story that's not a pilgrimage story. If you've watched the videos before, you've heard it before, but I love this story. My sister, by the way, who, when the Cubs won, I was down in Birmingham watching the game with her. And when the Cubs won that final game, she jumped up cheering, and she said, "Roll Tide." That's what they say in Alabama when they're happy. That commercial you saw a few years ago after one of the national championships where I do Roll Tide, an officer gives a ticket, Roll Tide. That's not a joke. They really do that. Anyway, my sister used to be the assistant manager of a farmer's co-op in a big farming county. A lot of commercial tomato farmers down there, some peach growers. Well, I was in town, I was down there, I was driving by the town because I figured I'd stop by and see her. Went inside, they were covered up with business. They had 4 registers going. She had come out and run one of the registers. Every register was 3 deep in customers. The second person in line where she was at, that's the register she was running, he was just being obnoxious. He said, "I want to hear biggest customers. You need to take care of me, right?" I mean, he just wouldn't shut up. Finally, my sister looked at him and said, "I'll get to you when it's your turn. If you don't knock it off, you're going to the back of the line." He crosses his arm and he said, "I've been praying for more patience." Sometimes I say something before, I just react. And I looked at him and I said, "Don't you know when you pray for patience, God doesn't sprinkle you with magic fairy dust and make you patient. He gives you opportunities to be patient. So quit complaining and thank God for answering your prayer." He looks at me, his eyes got wide, and he said, "You're right. I should have known that. I'm a preacher." So you never know what you're going to do. I want to finish the formal part by telling you. The Satan has a lot of tools. One of the most important tools he has is despair, shame. Everybody in here, if you're old enough, everybody in here has done something you thought you'd never do. Something that you were embarrassed by, something that, just we're human. What happens when you do that, when you stumble in that way? The Satan likes to fill you with shame so that you stay away from your faithful friends. Maybe you avoid Mass, maybe you don't go to confession, maybe you don't go to church because you think, "I'm not worthy to be with those people, and I'm not worthy to stand in God's presence again." I got news for you. God already knows that you're not worthy, just as you do. He's not interested in that. What God is interested in is, are you willing? If things are going good, will you acknowledge Him? Will you be that sign of hope to those around you? If you have just messed up big time of your own fault, will you humbly get up the next day and start again and acknowledge Him and be that sign of hope? If you're willing, and you'll keep doing it, as St. Paul says, in season and out of season, God will make a powerfully useful tool of you in His hands. Just keep going at it. That's the formal part. We'll talk about other things when we take the questions and answers. Right now, I'd like to finish this part with the St. Michael prayer. I think it's certainly the prayer for our time. One thing, traveling around the country, I found that everybody across the country says it a little bit different. Understand the St. Michael prayer was not written in English. We're all saying it in translation. Let's all say it together. You say your translation, I'll say mine, and we'll do it together. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint Michael, the archangel, defend us in the day of battle. Be our safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke you. We humbly pray and do that. O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Thanks, guys. Take 10, go to the washroom, do whatever, but wait till I get in there first. And we'll get back together in just a minute. Confusing. There's nothing, I can do some simple things are extremely painful for us. Some things that are physically very demanding are simple for us. It's like if you had a wiring system, if you had a robot with wiring, if you broke off the physical arm, you replace the physical arm. If the wiring is shorted out and doesn't work, replacing the physical arm isn't going to help anything. My wiring is shut. With a robot, you can replace it. With a human, you can help with physical things. You can't replace the wiring. I am supposed to be paralyzed on my right side. I'm not. I'm in pain. I walked across the country with that. You think you haven't gone through it? Yes, I have. Physical therapy will do me no good whatsoever because there's nothing physically wrong with it. But I understand the instinct. When I was walking with the 75-pound pack, I thought, I'm getting so strong. You know, I'd stand up after a while with that pack on my back, and I thought, well, this is great. If I can do this, then I'll have no pain whatsoever. If I don't have the pack on my back, and God, who I often say the only thing wicked about God is his sense of humor. And when I took the pack off, just as painful getting up with nothing on my back. It's neurological, it's not physical. Physical therapy doesn't do me any good. The other question that's more interesting, you as far as I know don't talk about your divorce or what do you advise to those who have gone through a divorce. We are a broken people. I have talked about my divorce, but I don't like to talk about it much. I am okay with the church. I think it's a privilege of faith, a Pauline privilege. I got to get the Pope's approval if I wanted to get married again. I don't think there's much danger of that. But it is brutally painful. You know, we've gone through all sorts of trials in this world. Some of the most faithful people I know have been through divorces. Get right with the church. Get the help. If you're going to a priest that doesn't get it, and there are a lot that don't, find one that does. Get right with the church. You know, my brother, one of my brothers, he had problems with drug and alcohol, and as so many in these times, he and his fiancée made a hash of their personal lives. This fiancée is good for him, and he's good for her. But he was not going to church. He was helping me with a lot of things, but he wasn't going to Mass because he talked to a priest and said, you know, you can't take communion until you get through with it. And so this brother, who tends to get a little bit, you know, confrontational, said, no, if they won't accept me as I am, I won't. I said, what are you doing? I said, your cases are slam dunks. You've got to jump through some hoops. Jump through those hoops. So well, it's embarrassing to go to church and not go. So I was an adult. When I went for the first 7 months, I couldn't receive. I was going to daily Mass. I was kind of amused when I found all these people at the daily Mass. When I started coming, were wondering what terrible sin does he have on his guts. So do it. You got yourself into the mess. The church gives you a way to get yourself out of it. I did agree with Pope Francis a couple of years ago when he said one of the most, actually it's something I have been saying too, that most marriages in the world today, if examined, would probably be found to be invalid, because a lot of our cultural assumptions are that marriage is kind of a trial period. It's not. The Catholic understanding of marriage is that it's a lifelong covenant. If you go into it with that attitude, it's not a valid marriage. You didn't meet the preconditions. Now, you can form a marriage that was invalid when it started and validated by your completely validated by the understanding that you had. God does not leave people bereft. Don't feel like you're second-class citizens if you're divorced. Humbly go through what you have to go through. I know, you've always got the sex drive, and it as well. I understand that. I mean, I was at one point an enthusiastic recruit for the sexual revolution. I've been celibate for 12 years. And the first 7 or 8 years, that was hard. I'm not real handsome or all that sort of thing, but boy, I'm charming as all get out. It was real hard. And I didn't even do it because of the purity that St. Augustine speaks of. I mean, I identified with St. Augustine. We had some of the same struggles. The main reason, there were several, the main reason that I finally started living celibacy 12 years ago was because I thought, holy cow, there's going to come a time when I'm going to have to speak in God's name. I don't mind people knowing what I was, but I'm not going to give scandal to the church or the faithful. And that I thought that was a defective thing, but it actually is love for God's people, love for God's church. We're all broken people. My son said something that is profound, I thought was profoundly wise. And that one or times, I've been a sinner. I've never drank deeply from the disorders of the age, but I have sipped from a lot of them. And I feel like, why me? I'm not worthy of this. My son said, Dad, everybody's broken. He said, when everybody's broken, how better to assure people that God really wants all his people back than to send somebody who's been broken as well. Trust God. He wants you back. Humbly take the steps that you need to take and accept the discipline that you need to go through. But I'm going to tell you this, God loves you. I do know you get divorced. You go crazy for a couple of years. You're trying not to, but you go crazy for a couple of years. It's painful when there's kids involved. It is so painful. Grow from it. Let it give you a greater largeness of spirit. One of the things that I've told people at times, I meet people who are divorced that are quick to condemn other sins. But they're very nice on divorce and that. Then I meet people who have never had it, who have something else, and they're real condemnatory of divorce. I have taken to telling people that there's nothing so easy to condemn as a sin which you're not tempted by. Whatever you're tempted to condemn flatly, think of what you are tempted by. God reminds us we need to have humility and we need to have compassion. It really will go hard for those who are miserly with the mercy they have received themselves in such abundance from above. If you're divorced, I got news for you. God loves you. He knows we're broken people. I'm divorced. One of the things I do, I quit smoking a few years ago. I do this vape thing. My son introduced it to me. I mean, it's just vape. It's like an inhaler. When he introduced me to it, I had told him that I like smoking. I'd given up all my vices, and I was keeping that. If it satisfied me, I'd go for it. If not, I was going to keep smoking. Actually, I like it a lot better than smoking. But I keep a pack of cigarettes around. I forgot to bring them today to this conference. I keep a pack because I was a smoker. I know how much like outcast smokers feel. So if I see people going for the exits, to get a smoke, smokers can tell. I like to go out and have a smoke with them. Let them know that you're not an outcast when you're with me and that. One of the things I loved about Opus Dei I learned this after I'm a co-operator of it. Originally, St. Jose Maria Escriva, after he set up the houses, one of the rules he had was that every house there must be one priest who's a smoker. So everybody would feel comfortable and welcome. You know, don't condemn what you're not tempted by. Show some compassion, accompany people. Anyway, I could talk forever on any subject. And sometimes I do. A friend of mine once told me that, Charlie, you don't have to speak in terms in order for your words to be immortal. Right. All right. Let me look. Let's see. Okay, can you review what parts of the storm that have been revealed to you? I want to suggest on that that you read the website, charliejohnston.org. There's a search feature. Go through the storm. It's the collapse of all the institutions that have upheld us, and that we will go through more trials. We've got a lot of scary things ahead on that. But that question is a good question, but it would require a complete another presentation. If you're interested, go to the website. In the search feature, put up the storm, and it'll pull up all articles related to it. This is the question that can be answered is, will the storm be over when the Immaculate Heart of Mary triumphs in late 2017? Yes, there may be a few vestiges of it left, but yes, all of our hearts will be transformed. Late in 2017, we will be visibly and miraculously rescued by Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. It is the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. And on this, I encourage people to contemplate. Think about what that means. Sometimes there was one lady and one that asked me, said, well, how long after that will abortion be stopped? Will it ever be stopped? And I looked at her, I was kind of flabbergasted. I said, what kind of a rescue would it be if we kept doing the same things that got us into the mess in the first place? She couldn't quite believe that abortion would be over. And I said, you know, if you've seen, think in natural terms. If you got somebody you can't stand, you've hated each other for years, and you're about to be hit by a car, and that person nearly gets himself killed rescuing you, you're going to see him different. You're going to look at him different. That's in the natural world. But all of us, visibly and see, think we're at the end of things, or maybe at the end, it's just not looking good, and see Our Lady visibly and miraculously rescue us, it's going to change the way we look. We're going to want to do what God commands us to. So yes, that will end the storm. Now, when I say that will end the storm, and there's vestiges, there could be some holdouts, just like after World War II, you had some Japanese soldiers for another 20 years on Okinawa that didn't know it was over. Who knows? You might have a Japanese soldier on Okinawa that hasn't, but basically it will. What word of hope do you draw from persons during this time with all that is to come? Why do you think relevant radio does not confirm or acknowledge your mission? I did a taped interview with Drew Mariani on Relevant Radio the day before yesterday. First of all, media, you know, I've got a ton of friends at EWTN, both in among the executives and among the things. It's not their thing to get into private revelation. In fact, several of them apologized to me, you know, we haven't interviewed you because I said, no, that's not your thing. Live your mission. I don't expect everybody to co-opt themselves to live my mission on the thing. And I have told them, though, that, you know, if there comes a point where it's general interest for everyone, I'll call my friends at EWTN first. And that there was, here's the thing that I think you have to understand. There has been some pushback sometimes. There isn't really a lot of it. anymore. People in most dioceses, they'll get the complaints that I'm coming, they'll call my archdiocese and find out, okay, you're supposed to use caution and prudence, but it's okay. It's right that priests and that different people should discern. Because the reality is that 99 out of 100 people that talk about the things I do are frauds or deluded. So why would I get upset? There was no special magic about me where I would assume that right at the start. People, you know, last year, at most, I haven't had it happen this year, but at most of my presentations, I'd get 2 or 3 people coming up afterwards apologizing to me because they came planning to debunk me for the obvious fraud they knew me to be, and it wasn't at all what they expected. I've had more than a few situations like that. I don't have many problems with anybody around here. You get some mid-level functionaries sometimes that get all themselves all worked up. But like I said, I did a taped interview with Brew Mariana day before yesterday. Okay, Q&A. You mentioned, okay, this is good. You mentioned that at 7 years old, you gave your angel 2 conditions. What were the conditions he had for you? There are things you need to know, there are things you don't. And I don't mind you asking that, but that's none of your business. I told you what I'm supposed to be. I told you what my job is, to help give people heart to endure the rescue. With their permission, even my director priests, I don't tell everything anymore for a long time, because most of it is for me to give me some instruction on how to help give people heart to endure the storm on the thing. And so I mean no disrespect on that. Curiosity is natural. You know, I've asked, for what it's worth, it's been a long time, but I asked my angels questions where he told me none of my business. So I just treat you like he treats me. Why do you have 3 spiritual directors? I explained that. They all work with each other. I have an unusual situation. I was referred to them. I'm not going to explain it anymore. One was the superior of the others. They work together. It's something that's developed over 21 years. They referred me to do, one is a canon lawyer, one is the one that has been an authority, one's a theologian. They got that situation done. And as I explained at the start of this, you do not direct or hunt. Yes, it's different, but that's not what I'm doing. Are we supposed to prepare for the storm spiritually and physically? Store extra food and medicine? On the physically, go ahead and make any prudent preparations that you want to, but with this in mind, the only real preparation, the only place of safety and refuge is holding fast to Christ under the mantle of Mary. If you truly trust God, then if all you have is a loaf of bread, when things get rough, it'll be more than enough. If you're putting your trust in your preparations, even though you have as much as Fort Knox, it won't be nearly enough. Everybody is going to be required, everybody, to trust God in this time. So that's really the answer. I know some people think it's Zen. It's not. It's Christian. You have to trust God. The reason we've got into this situation is because we think that we're sufficient to ourselves. We're not. If you put truly your trust in God, your faith in God, almost anything listed is okay for you. You're free in everything. The danger is, as you put more in that, you start putting less trust in God and more trust in your preparations. God will take them from you if that's what you're doing. That's the danger in it. But I've toured a lot of places where people have put aside food, they put aside things. They've gotten a little extra land to put up some things in case people are dislocated. I congratulate them for the generosity of spirit and using their money now to help other people through that. So there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I do nothing. Because I know that if If everything were to crash, God knows where I am, and He knows what I want, what He wants of me. I may not know for a while, but He'll show me soon enough. And that actually was one of the things that was great about pilgrimage. I was in Houston when I figured out that, holy cow, I wouldn't like it, but if everything crashed tomorrow, I know how to get cover, I know how to get fish, I'd be fine. You know? That's the key. Don't panic. Don't get control until you think you can handle everything. Okay. Question here. Would you be on a major news show in the future to share your 3 messages of acknowledge God, take the next right step, and the rescue in 2017? I almost feel like Johnny Carson with Karnak the Magnificent. I tell you what, if things get ugly, I probably would be. If there's still news shows around, I don't know. Those sorts of questions. When I get asked, I go and do. But I'm not. I don't. I just do the next thing, what's right in front of me. It asked me, will Trump be inaugurated and take office? If everything stays normal, he will. But if it doesn't, he won't. Time will tell. We've got the storm. The key thing here is, our problem is spiritual and moral and cultural. There's not a political answer to that. Until we become spiritually and culturally renewed and humble ourselves before God, this storm isn't over. All right, let's see. This is kind of cool. I like these. Yeah, okay. The Karnak the Magnificent. How many of you saw Karnak the Magnificent? These, so a lot of you know what I'm talking about. You young folks, you're not with it. The old folks are with it today. Okay. Have you seen other entities, angels, besides Gabriel, your angel, our mother, and the Lord? Do they have a good sense of humor? Yes, I have. I pretty much only stick to the major 3, which is my angel, in charge with instructing me, Our Lady, and the Lord. And most have a good sense of humor. It's like people, except some people, have a great sense of humor. Some not so much. The church triumphant, the church militant, they're without sin by the time they get to the church militant or the church triumphant. But some have, my angel, he's got a lively sense of humor. Our Lord has kind of a punkish, interesting sense of humor. The angels love puns sometimes. Our Lady is very kind and sweet. She's more focused. She's more serious all the time about bringing souls back. She's very sorrowful for all the kids that are lost. So she's wonderful, but she doesn't joke around much. So it is, everybody has their personality. One of the things, my priests, and some others now, when they see some bit of private revelation, I do not read other private revelation. That was originally a part of my direction, so that I didn't mix it up, so I didn't get, and that sort of thing. But sometimes my priests and others will ask me to look through something to see, is it potentially authentic? Because you get a sense, if your dad, or your mom, somebody that you know very well is speaking, if somebody's imitating them, you'll know if you know them intimately. Let's see. When the rescue comes, will we still have so many challenges to overcome? That's a good question. We won't have so many, we'll have changed hearts. But when you have changed hearts, some of you, maybe all of you here, have either had some sort of an addiction or love somebody who has some sort of an addiction. When you deal and confront the problem and start going into recovery, that doesn't make everything go away. You constantly have to work at it on things. So you've got that inclination towards it, and you'll have to struggle with it. We'll have renewed heart. It will be easier to deal with. It won't be widespread, but we'll have to guard to make sure that we're not tempted. The venial sins, in themselves, don't do as much damage. It's like cutting. It's like a cut. But the venial sins do lead you to more venial sins, to more cuts. And then they can get infected. So it's very important. I liken it sometimes. I liken this stay steady. Don't panic. Okay. Interesting question here. Someone asked me, is there anything good spiritually about dragons? I mean, it's an interesting question. The Satan always appears to me as a dragon. Well, not always, almost always. Dragons, biblically, are satanic beings. So I gotta tell you that no, there isn't anything good about dragons. Angelic beings, all of that sort of thing. My son, there was a time, I knew a time, I mean, I kept the stuff for my kids. There was a time for each of them. My son didn't have a mystical bone in his body. He never suspected anything. And the Satan would always attack me as a dragon. My son suddenly got caught up. He was getting all this dragon. I thought, okay, it's time to tell him when he was a teenager. And I did. I'm just going to tell you, stay away from dragons. I know somebody, I knew a woman, who wanted to argue with me about how, no, dragons are good. I have a friend that's a dragon. You know, and I told her, I take that stuff serious. Because I've seen manifestations before. I said, no, if you're actually seeing the dragon, it's pretending to be your friend long enough until you fall for it, and then it will hurt you. The woman, she didn't believe me, and her life is a disaster. Her life quickly became a disaster. There is nothing good about dragons. How often do you communicate with your angel, and what do you see, hear, feel? Let's do this first to it. It's like family. You know, they drop in whenever they feel like, probably 2 or 3 times a week. The big ones, important visitations, you could have 2 in a year, you could have 5 years go by between the important ones. But 2 or 3 times a week I have communication. Second, and this is really good. I'm going to get a little bit agitated at this. I don't know who put it. How do you reconcile the rescue in 2017 with the supposed 3.5 years of great tribulation that doesn't seem to have started yet? A very presumptuous question. A very self-centered, self-absorbed question. You tell our brothers in the Middle East, 1.5 million of who have been butchered, beheaded, crucified, and burned, that nothing has started yet. You start living solidarity, and you see that you have to recognize your brother's pain, that it doesn't wait until the barbarian is at the door to cut your throat. Pure and simple. And let me tell you something. And if you think there's nothing wrong because the barbarian hasn't been there to cut your throat, and you're not living that solidarity with Christians that are being butchered around the globe, it's going to go harder for you than it went for them. Get out of that nonsense. I don't know who wrote this, but you have put yourself in great peril by thinking that way. But because I'm okay, and the things around me, and I can still watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, nothing is wrong. I am telling you, We in America, you know, we've taken over, and it may be more by now, 13,000 refugees from Syria. Do you know how many of those are Christian? Less than 100, 58. Our State Department has actively been trying to keep the most persecuted people, Christians, out. What have we done? Have we petitioned our Congress? Have we been out there? You got idiots out there protesting an election. Why do we have people protesting? To stand up, get the Christians, the people that are being butchered, beheaded, and burned out. The 3.5 years of tribulation also, you're talking about an interpretation of Revelation. You also assume that you have perfectly interpreted Revelation. Let me tell you something. The church has said certain things, but there are as many interpretations of Revelation as there are saints. I have spent 50 years being instructed and being taught, and I have far less confidence that I know exactly what's going to happen than many people who haven't even read the whole Bible. They've read a piece of it. Stop thinking you know exactly how it is. Now, what are the supernatural chastisements spoken of by other visionaries, asteroids, volcanoes, earthquakes? I don't care what other visionaries say. I submit everything to my, I am under discipline of my spiritual director, and I'm under discipline of my archbishop. If I say something contrary to faith and morals, if I say something in serious conflict, I got people that will tell me. I hope that every visionary, some have, some authentic ones, have submitted themselves to the same sort of discipline. Most haven't. So, as long as I'm in good shape on that, I'm fine. But, if you think nothing has happened yet, you are in danger of the judgment. I'm telling you that. I've got to give you that warning. You have to live solidarity with your brothers. You have to live solidarity. Most great tragedies, most great collapses have happened because most people will not believe that anything is wrong until the barbarians are at their door. So better than 95% are shocked when crash comes. Be better than that. Be better than that. God demands that you be better than that. You don't have to fear it. In fact, if you didn't even believe it at all, and you had truly lived solidarity with your brothers, if you had been working for real relief efforts, if you had been pushing our government to do what it could to stand with Christians and stop that persecution, we could have done it. We could have done it well. Then God would smile with approval at you. But while you're sitting there in your comfort zone, and saying that there's nothing wrong, you're far from God. Okay, let's see. You said you were instructed to talk for the USA. I did not. I was instructed to deliver the message to the world. I am a man who lives in America. So I speak from an American standpoint. I've already got people, I got leaders in every part of the globe. They're storm dinners in different parts of the globe. Are you including the territories Guam, the British? First of all, there's a misunderstanding. I've never, ever said I was only sent to the USA. My work is for the whole world. So yes, it includes, if it's part of the world, it includes that. The prayer of a man. Okay, the prayer of miraculous trust. It says the prayer of immaculate trust. The prayer of miraculous trust is supposed to be prayed only once for a particular intention. I am unable to remember if I have already prayed for certain petitions. Is it okay to pray? I love this. This is good. No, it really is. God knows how feeble we are. He knows what we are. First of all, I want to make something clear. On the prayer of miraculous trust, it's to develop trust. It has a specific goal. So you say that prayer. You only say it one time for any particular intention. You can divide it so that you're saying it for, I probably say it 7 times a day for different petitions. And then let it go. That doesn't mean you shouldn't pray over and over in other ways. We have St. Augustine because he was bathed in decades of St. Monica's prayers. But you have to learn to trust. Here's the thing. We're always walking with a fine line. When you pray exhaustively, you can come to think that prayers get answered because of your Herculean efforts rather than because of God's effortless grace. This helps to remind you that it's God's effortless grace always on things. When you forget, God loves you like a daddy loves his son. You don't get mad if your son forgets. If you forget not sure whether you did it or not, then pray it again. If you don't know whether you were baptized, you get a conditional baptism. It's always your intent. That's the key. So you feel free. If you don't remember whether or not you prayed it before for a particular intention, pray it again just in case. God knows what you remember or not, and you're good. God doesn't hit you up for, little things. Honest errors. Let's see. Yes, okay, let's see what else is here. The Holy Father continues to say confusing things. 4 cardinals have openly and firmly questioned him about Amoris Laetitia. The response from the Holy Father has been dismissive. If there's some plan that only makes sense to him, because he seems to be doing real damage to the church. I'm actually planning to write about that fairly quickly, the Divine Symphony. This is the Pope. This is the Pope that God has chosen for these times. His virtue is that he wants to call everybody in. He wants to get as many people in. Remember, I say that we always have to walk a knife's edge. Those people who are concentrating on bringing everybody in. Here's the thing. When you get caught up in sin, you dig yourself a pit. And you get caught in that pit. Once you recognize how damaging it is, you've still got to get out of the pit. Some people that are focused on the law, they look and they just want to denounce somebody for being in the pit. They don't help them out. Other people who are focused on charity, they look and they want them to make him feel good about being in the pit instead of helping him out. Both things leave him in the pit. We need both mercy and justice, both love and the law on this. Something that people don't realize, and I wish people understood church history better. This is not unusual. Actually, this is the way, the doctrine. I actually was kind of heartened when the cardinals put the question to the Pope bluntly on that, because that means that serious work is being done here. Throughout history, this is the way it's been done. We get in our minds that all the previous saints and that it was just all in agreement. Everything fell into place. If you knew the real history of the church, you know that contemporary saints often spent their entire life at each other's throats. There's a dynamic tension in that. The Holy Father, this is not magisterial, but yeah, he was kind of dismissive. This is a corrective. It will work out. Right now, I think the Holy Father is so passionate about bringing people in that he's in danger of enabling some things. Now, these cardinals are doing what they're supposed to, calling him back to it. He's angry. He's angry at being challenged. And he's doing, he said, he's calling everybody rigid. Of late, he's taken to calling everybody rigid and disagrees with them on something in legitimate ways. And I was thinking yesterday, I think, he's getting kind of rigid about that. This is the way it's always worked. It doesn't tell you that the church is breaking apart. What it tells you is that the leader with serious issues. Here's a serious issue about Amoris Laetitia. We've got a lot of broken people. We've got a lot of that connects with the divorce question I had. It's going to take serious work. We've got to bring those people back. You've got some people that focus on the law that would just leave those people out hurting. That's not an answer. That's not the answer God wants. You've got some people focusing on compassion that would leave people enable the very things that have made people so miserable to begin with. We're dealing with something very serious. I'm heartened to see that you've got holy people and flawed people taking it seriously and locking horns a little bit. Because throughout church history, that's the way the best doctrinal development has become. Boy, if we ever want disorder to come. So, that's my answer to that. I don't like it. Well, that's all I'm going to say about that. What is the best thing we can do to prepare and remain faithful? And what does my angel look like? First of all, what can we do to prepare and remain faithful? 3 things. Acknowledge God, take the next right step, be a sign of hope. That's it. You live that well. Whatever the question is, that answer works. What does my angel look like? I'm actually glad you asked that, because it brings something to mind. Eternal beings can appear in any form they want. And they appear in a form that's comfort. It's very important to them to comfort you. To put you at ease, because they want people they want to help you. And to give you evidence of this, Jesus, after he was resurrected, his disciples, the men who had just spent over 3 years traipsing around the desert with him, they never recognized him at first. It was after he was talking. They had spent 3 years in close proximity to him. They didn't recognize him. You look at Our Lady. You know, most of us, our image in our head is something like Our Lady of Fatima. You know the images there. And yet, Our Lady of Tepeyac or Guadalupe looks very different. But it's Our Lady. Our Lady of Akita looks different than that, as does Our Lady of Quevedo. They want to set us at our ease. So how it looks to me may look different to you. One of the things I want to let you know, I would just about guarantee you that everybody in here has seen an angel. Because angels can hide their glory. They love to come when you're hurting, when you're really sorrowful, when you're in trouble, to give you that encouraging word, to give you a bit of help, and then you go back. It's kind of like Angel Peanut. That person, when you were in deep trouble, he gave you that encouraging word and vanished. You know, you couldn't find anymore. Probably an angel. Not always, but probably an angel. The thing is, they can do more for us when we ask. And the church militant and the church triumphant should work together. Just ask. If you do that, they can do more for you. So that's what I'd encourage you. But you've seen angels. I would say, with angel humor, you know, they love the GPS systems that we have, because what they do now, when each of us, the guardian angels, they love to look at each other now. When you mess up in some fundamental way, one guardian angel will look at the other, roll his eyes, and say, recalculating. Let's see. Okay, we need so much to re-educate the adults in our country to be a truly free, moral people, not to mention the youth and children. Do you have any thoughts or comments on how best to do this and bring focus back to private virtue? The storm is designed for that. The question is, you be the refuge. You be its one. God knows the reason for the storm is for exactly the reasons you say. People, when we thought we're sufficient to ourselves, we put our hope in human institutions. We put our hope in the outcome of an election. Look at how many, we put our hope in human institutions. You look at the anti-God progressives, they put their hope in nothing but human institutions, even though of the constant failures there. It's caring for each other that is the key on that. And it works one at a time. What I'd like to remind you is, here's the thing. God gives us a storm. He allows the storm to proceed because each person will lose their hope in human institutions. It'll be at different times. When that happens, they've got two choices. Here's where you're held to account. Give witness to God's goodness in ages past, that He's always there for anybody who calls on Him with sincerity and humility, and He's reliable. And live that joyfully. You cannot tell people that, we can trust in God, there's hope in Him. If your face gives a lie to your words, you are not a witness. Do it by how you live. And don't forget that what our Lord says, there's a parable of the two sons. The one who said he'd go do his father's will and didn't, and the one who said he wouldn't and did. It's those who do the Father's will that find approval from the Father, not those who talk about it. Give you a little example. When I was walking in Alabama, again, early on, I went into a convenience store for coffee. In Alabama, they have, this is something typical there. They have the combination, they don't just have a gas station or convenience store. They have a combination gas station, convenience store, cafe, canoe rental, and beer preparation. That's how they do it. So I walked in there in the morning, it's about 8 o'clock. I'm the first person in. Gal behind the counter starts asking me about what I'm doing, because I didn't pull up in the car and I had the bag. I tell her. She's charged. She told me I had as much coffee as I want on her. I knew it wasn't on her. It was on whoever owned the place, but I was getting coffee. So who am I to complain? I went and sat at one of the tables. A few minutes later, a man comes in, and you can tell, when you're the only 3 people in the place, you know when people are talking about you, because it is. He comes over to sit down with me. He wants to talk about it. No, I said, yeah, come on, sit down on the table. He said, now let me explain to you. He said, look, you got to understand before we start talking that I'm an atheist. I said, that's okay. I said, God reads hearts. And if you get goodwill in your heart, it's a little confusion in your head or in your lips, God will take care of that. If there's bad will in your heart, you can say Jesus all you want to. You ain't fooling God. He got laughed. We sat down and talked. We talked for about an hour and a half. We talked about everything. His kids, my kids, this work, all of those things. We had a real nice time. We had all the coffee we wanted. How can you go wrong with that? I needed to get up and get moving, so I got up to go. And told him, it's been wonderful, but I got to make some tracks here. And he looks at me, and he says, if things are like you say, I hope there is a God. I looked at him and I said, there is, and He's going to take your good wishes for me as a prayer. I said, that'll be all right. Don't get caught up in trying to convince people that you're right. Love them. If their heart is good and kind, give thanks for that and respond in kind. God brings people in. I want to remind you, I presume most people are Catholics here, and those that are not Catholic, you've probably gone to some candlelight services. I like the Easter Vigil. Probably everybody. The church starts in darkness. From the Easter candle, somebody lights their candle, and then everybody lights the candle of the person next to them. Within minutes, the church is infused with light. That's what you're called to do. Not some big, grandiose plan to solve things. God's got that. Do what's right in front of you, and everything will be transformed. That's the plan. So Somebody drew some pictures here of a dog, and me with a microphone and a baseball hat. Okay. I don't think that's really the question. Well, actually, what's got a question asked, have you ever seen your angel? Yeah, pretty regularly. Okay. I have a son in China. Is there a time you would recommend for him to come home? Use normal prudence, normal temporal prudence. If you try to outwit God, then God figures you're a slow learner that needs special attention. God knows where you are. He knows what He wants of you. So, no, don't do that. Just take the next right step. It's wise. I make no provision for the future. Now, actually, if I were not me, I probably would. But I don't want anybody. With where I'm at right now, if I did anything, people would want to adopt the Charlie Johnston plan. As long as the Charlie Johnston plan is to do the normal things you do every day and trust God completely, I'm good with that. So, no, I don't have any recommendation, but I will tell you this. If you try to pull them out because you have inside knowledge, you think you have inside knowledge, the results will be very bad. Just deal with it every step of the way, trusting God. When you start worrying, thinking about that, you're not trusting God. You're trying to take the controls back. Trust God. Use normal temporal prudence. If you go beyond that thinking of inside knowledge, you're at risk. Okay, let's see. Will the permanent sign at Mount Meeker coincide with the permanent sign predicted at Medjugorje and Garland? I don't know if there will be a permanent sign at Mount Meeker. There'll be a permanent shrine there. That's all I've talked about. And the permanent sign, it does touch on something that I think is important to you. Did you know, most times people don't recognize authentic prophecy when it plays out because we're as blind as bulls and we always have to have the literal interpretation. You want to know what is a permanent sign? The crucifix is a permanent sign. It's not still standing at Golgotha. It's permanent though, isn't it? For 2,000 years. Here's the thing, and I want you to be very careful. Let's just take the 3 days of darkness that many have prophesied. Not Padre Pio, I should know. Everybody wants to attribute that to Padre Pio, because they like Padre Pio. I think it gives it more credibility. 4 saints have made that prophecy. I want you to know, do you know when Jesus came, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the doctors of the law not only knew that He was not the Messiah, they could prove it from Scripture. Actually, they couldn't. They could prove it from their fractured understanding of Scripture that was too literal. They knew that Elijah must come first. And of course, what they were expecting, like the blind little moles we all are, was Elijah to appear in the sky, fiery chariot and all, and there's the guy. They didn't recognize a prophet in the image of Elijah with his integrity and boldness in St. John the Baptist. All the Jews thought that the Messiah would be a political and military leader that would establish a temporal kingdom. In fact, all the Jews thought this, including John the Baptist. One of the sweetest passages to me is just a few weeks before his death, when John the Baptist sends to Jesus and asks, "Are you the one we seek, or should we look for another?" And, what John is asking, this is the guy that recognized Jesus inside the womb. But Jesus didn't match his expectations. What John is asking, and this touches me deeply, he's asking Jesus, does my life have meaning, or am I just a nut? And I love the answer that Jesus gives. He doesn't answer that. He says, go tell John what you see. The sick are healed, the blind see. He just tells them the things happening. People are giving you heart, you joy. And blessed is he who takes no offense. Holy cow. That was so comforting to John those last few weeks. Here's the danger. People often assume they put a literal interpretation, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they assume that's the only possible interpretation. Sometimes we get the fireworks show, most of the time we don't. It happens more subtly. If you've decided that only a literal interpretation in your head can possibly be, prophecy will be fulfilled in front of your face without you even noticing, because you are completely engaged with your preconceptions. And that actually is how it's happened. Most of the time throughout history. The most knowledgeable, the most educated, the most faithful miss prophecy when it happens. 3 days of darkness. An interesting thing has happened to me. See, if the world goes dark for 3 days and all that, that's no skin off my nose. It'll make my job easier. That'll make people believe a little bit more in that God is in control. That's good by me. But if you're waiting on that, I've had about 30 letters in the last 2 years from people who had a great conversion experience. Something happened that just rocked their world, that completely turned topsy-turvy their whole basis of how they looked at the world. In every case, they told me for 3 days they just couldn't get their feet on the ground. And then after that, they readjusted, and it was always a deep conversion experience, or deepening of their conversion. Not one of those letters says 2 days, not one of them says 4 days. I personally think 3 days of darkness is true, but it speaks to 3 days when your whole world is going to be changed. And the beeswax, which represents purity, is the purity of your heart. And besides, I really have a hard time believing that God is going to smack you down for not having loaded up with beeswax. The beeswax candles on that. The illumination of conscience. Everybody thinks that God is going to tell us exactly what he's doing when he does that. That'll give you an extra chance. What is an illumination of conscience? I think maybe the rescue will be the definitive illumination of conscience. Often God gives foreshadowings. But what is an illumination of conscience? You're shown something that is temporally convenient and something that's true. And you have to choose. And you decide who you are by that choice. A couple of years ago, when the Kermit Gosnell thing was going on, he was a Philadelphia abortion doctor that was killing born babies gruesomely and gleefully. And that the media tried to cover it up until even some of the lefties said, whoa. I was talking to my best friend, a judge in Southern Illinois, former state party chairman. I said, you know what, Steve, this is an illumination of conscience. After this, people can still be pro-abortion, but when they stand before God, they can't say that they didn't know what it was. I've been saying over the last year particularly that we are delivering ourselves up to judgment. It's not what it seems. We are being forced to choose between what is ideologically important to us and what is true. And we're revealing who we are. We stand in judgment. So the person that's always talking about Jesus but is choosing some ugly things, they're in trouble. The person who says that, they're not Christian or they're not, and they're living, helping their neighbor, loving, taking care of their family, they're doing the Father's will. We have delivered ourselves up to judgment. Okay. Let's see, I think we got it. Okay. This says, do you feel that there are better areas of the country to be in this year of the storm? Will there be refugees and communities to move? First of all, with the storm, it's not going to be a zombie apocalypse. Okay? We're not in Mad Max territory. Most real things, as opposed to movie stuff, in most real things, 75 to 80% of the people, for great turmoil, end up living in the same place where they started. Is there a safer place to be? The best place to be is where God calls you to be. Do the normal things. I speak of the ordinary. Do the ordinary things that you're called to do and trust God. God really does know where you're at, what He wants on things. If you try to thwart it, then you just put yourself in peril. You know, I had a friend, family in Denver that's become kind of a surrogate family. Mom and Dad, they got 7 kids. And the mom had been trying to, they wanted to move. They wanted to get a place, you know, more out in the country and all that sort of stuff. And 3 times, the same, when they started to get some, it just didn't work out for bizarre reasons sometimes. I kept telling her, you know, God knows where you are. He wants. And she was so upset at one point. She said, what am I doing? I said, you want to know my advice? She said, wait. God said no to you 3 times, and you stubbornly keep trying to do it. Wait. She said, well, what if it gets, I said, you know what? Where I live, 20, 30 miles west, you'll get into cabins in the mountains. And those cabins in the mountains, 80% of them are just vacation cabins. You know, you get up there, I said, you got 7 kids. You walk 20, 30 miles west, if things got tight, you'll have plenty of cabins. And guess what? Those kids that society now considers a burden, all of a sudden they're an asset. You got people to chop wood and carry water. You know? Good stuff. Trust God. If He wants you to do it, I never discourage people if they want to do something that they think they should, give it a shot and then accept what God does. Quickly. That's all. So is there a safer place? I have no clue. I've never made any changes. It's coming to the whole world. The place of safety is holding fast to Jesus under the mantle of Mary. You be the refuge. One of the things that's come up a lot is people ask about, you know, angels leading us to refuges and all that sort of stuff. Poppycock. Okay? During the storm, it's because of what we have done and what we have failed to do. That business of angels carrying you safely to refuges, that's just a Catholic version of the Protestant doctrine of the rapture. The belief that God is going to take all the good little boys and girls to a place of safety while watching everybody else get smacked. Guess what? We are all accountable. You want to be a refuge? You be the refuge. You want to know who killed Christ? I did. And you did. You want to be a refuge? Be a refuge. You are the place of refuge. That's the key to everything. Now, are there places or some people likely to get dislocated? It could be. Help them when they come. If somebody comes, I tell you, if somebody comes and humbly asks for help, give them some help. If they want to be close to the community, they need to contribute, to do their part. Everybody can do some little thing. If you have all the gold in Fort Knox and somebody tries to come and take it by force, you defend your community. That's the key. You be the refuge. But all of us, there is no place of safety. The only place of safety is holding fast to Christ under the mantle of Mary. That's it. Anything else? It's been pretty exhausting. I mean, you covered all the ground. Once more, why don't we finish with the prayer of St. Michael? I really like the prayer of St. Michael to finish public assemblies, and after that I'll be around for a little bit, for a few minutes, to chat with people. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. St. Michael, the Archangel, defend us against Be our safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the word of souls. Amen. Thanks, folks. One more thing. I kind of like the logo. Well, I was in Detroit last week, or about a week and a half ago. They gave me this Cubs-colored rosary. They were going to give me a Tigers-colored rosary, but they figured I'd be more likely to use it if they made it Cubs-colored.
And you're close by, so I'll send out smoke signals. All right. Greg. Happy,
you look good. You look better. You lost weight, too. How you doing? As you said,